Yi Futian understood it, he really did. Although he still did not understand the truth of the world, he knew that his path must be the perfect one. Yi Futian understood it, he really did. Although he still did not understand the truth of the world, he knew that his path must be the perfect one. Although he had many life spirits, his natal spirit was always just the world tree. It was the world ancient tree that gave him many life spirits and endowed him with the gift of cultivating various paths and even merging the great paths. This was probably related to his life experience. He was born to be extraordinary, and his godfather said that he was destined to be a king in the future. Although he did not know his identity, even a powerful person like Lord Taishan could not escape the fate of the world and had sighed that the great path was lacking when he made the breakthrough. Even the strongest figures could not escape their fates, but Yi Futian could easily cross over his own from the moment of birth. He was very clear about that even in this imperfect world of cultivation, his path must be the perfect one. The divine wheel of the great path he would create when he set foot on the Renhuang plain in the future must also be a wheel without defects, which was to say, the extraordinary wheel of the great path in the eyes of the world. His life spirit could make up for the shortcomings of the world. He stopped talking because he knew what it meant. The divine palace had a treasure to make up for the defects of the path, so they always had to be alert to any crisis that might be brought by it. The reason why no one dared to touch it was because of the palace's power, but what about Yi Futian? If someone knew that his life spirit could make up for the defects of the path, he would instantly become a target, and how many people would be staring at him? Even the top figures in the cultivation world would be coveting it, and he might even end up dying without knowing who killed him. No wonder his godfather told him not to show his life spirit outside when he was young. Ordinary people might not know it, but those powerful people were likely to be able to spy something from him. The powerful person in this shrine could see through his disguise at one glance, and if his life spirit was revealed from his life palace, how could the person not perceive its peculiarity? Yi Futian didn't talk anymore and just cultivated quietly in the corner, perceiving the true meaning of the ubiquitous great path. He was totally absorbed in cultivation, so the person would not doubt anything. As expected, after seeing Yi Futian cultivate, the powerful figure in the shrine also fell silent and did not speak again. Soon, the shrine was quiet again. In the shrine, Yi Futian was comprehending and cultivating, and there was a roaring sound in his body. Outside the shrine, Huang Zhong was also cultivating. More precisely, Huang Zhong was comprehending, and what he wanted to do was to build what he thought was the perfect wheel of the great path. Only in this way could he live up to his knowledge and talent. The two were cultivating inside and outside the shrine. Many of the disciples in the divine palace were challenging the golden ancient road and the river of the path. Gai Shishir of the golden divine nation had tried many times and failed, but he was still trying. He could endure that the peerless talent of higher heaven's realm, Huang Zhong, passed it, but now, Yi Futian had also entered the shrine. Gai Shishir was not content. Ordinary people might not know the truth of this world, but as the top descendant of the golden divine nation, Gai Shishir knew more than ordinary people. The top one figure of the golden divine nation was a general of Donghuang the great emperor, so the senior leaders of the golden divine nation knew some truths in the world, and Gai Shishir also knew a little bit. He knew, so he wanted to be stronger. However, the golden ancient road was full of many powerful attacks, and although he could break through some, he had never been able to cross completely and could only struggle again and again. In fact, what Gai Shishir had achieved was beyond ordinary cultivators' ability. More people could not even pass the river of the path, and just one step was extremely far to take. Although the shrine was just in front of them, for the disciples of the divine palace, it was endlessly distant and unreachable. At this time, many people inside and outside the river of the path looked forward, and many of them were disciples of the divine palace. Both Gai Shishir and Xin Jing have crossed the river of the path. Did they enter the shrine? Many people discussed the matter amongst themselves. It's not an easy thing for them. Who is more promising to enter? Xin Jing, someone said. In those two battles he proved his unparalleled talent, and in the land of proving the way he defeated Gai Shishir. This time Lord Taishan chose an extraordinary figure to inherit his swordsmanship, and he has gained fame on this trip to the Divine Palace. Is Xinjing's trip to shrine also guided by Lord Taishan? Someone wondered aloud. Very possible. Many people said and began to think. There was no doubt that the swordsman in training Xinjing of Taishan Mountain was a direct disciple of Lord Taishan. Everyone had known about it, and it did not require confirmation. If Lord Taishan had known that he got a direct disciple out of thin air, nobody knew what he would think. Perhaps he would turn the Divine Palace upside down, or perhaps Lord Taishan wouldn't mind at all. Time passed by, and Gai Shirshir eventually gave up and returned, which made many people sigh. Some people asked Gai Shirshir whether Xinjing of Taishan Mountain had entered the shrine, but Gai Shirshir did not answer. He did not leave either. He chose to stay outside the river of the path. On this day, the last peak of Sword Comprehension Mountain suddenly gleamed with brilliant light, and then the 81 peaks of the Sword Comprehension Mountain shone together, and the sword will rushed up to the sky. At this moment, every cultivator in the Sword Comprehension Mountain looked in one direction, their hearts beating fast. In the Divine Palace, there were also many warriors looking at the direction where Sword Comprehension Mountain was located, with light shining in their eyes. A new breakthrough, someone whispered. Another Sword Emperor was born. Was he before Huangzhong? Many people discussed, and their hearts trembled. Did the previous war really help him break his shackles? On the last sword peak of Jianshan, a figure like a sword stood proudly on the top of the mountain, and there was a monstrous sword will flowing all over him. A terrifying sword river appeared between the sky and earth and turned into a giant sword of the Great Path. That was the divine wheel of Great Path being cast. Li Daozi, who made the breakthrough, would become a sword emperor. Many people of the divine Swordly family were also here and were all excited while watching this scene. Although there was a defeat, it did not affect Li Daozi's state of mind. No wonder he was the most outstanding figure of their generation in the divine Swordly family. On the top of one sword mountain, Wan Shuyi gazed in the direction of Li Daozi. Luo Yue said, Li Daozi was defeated in that battle, but shortly after that, Li Daozi made a breakthrough. It seems that Li Daozi's heart of sword was clear and was not affected at all, and the battle became his aid instead. He was looking for someone to quench the sword, and he only needed 2 more parts. After that battle, Xinjing helped him complete one part, and only the last part was left. Now he accomplished it and succeeded, Wan Shui said. It is indeed outstanding. We still have a long way to go. Does this also prove that he is more outstanding? Luo Yue whispered. Of course, Wan Shui nodded and said. Among 10,000 cultivators, you can only find one like Li Daozi in the world, and in the whole generation of the higher heavens realm, there were only 2 people like him. Now they are at the end of the river of the path. Can he enter the shrine? Luo asked. These days, there were many questions about whether or not Xinjing could enter the shrine. Every day, people discussed this matter. Wan Shi looked towards Yaya and remembered the conversation with her that day. At this moment, Yaya was still fully absorbed in her cultivation. She was a sword fanatic and was marvelous at swordsmanship, and even such a person had unparalleled confidence in Xinjing. So, he also had expectations. What if he really made it? After all, Xinjing had been in there for many days. Many months had passed. Although many people had left River of the Path, there were more and more discussions about Yi Futian. The longer he stayed on the other side of the River of the Path, the more possible it was that he had entered the shrine. Gai Shirshir's silence also made many people suspicious. On this day, there was no one here on the bank of the River of the Path, and only occasionally would someone come by to have a look. At this time, a figure came to the bank of River of the Path. He passed by and took a glance at the river. The towering palaces stood on both sides, but the whole space was still very quiet. Not yet, the man whispered, about to leave. He had no idea whether he had entered the shrine or not. But at this moment, just as he was just about to leave, he seemed to have noticed something. He paused a second and turned around and saw a figure standing above a sword and slowly coming from the River of the Path. He's come out, he thought to himself. His pupils contracted, and his heart trembled. Swordsman in training Xinjing of the Taishan Mountain walked out of the River of the Path. His temperament became more and more outstanding, and his life force was unfathomable. The sword floated above the river of the path, and he steered the sword and came slowly towards this side at a steady speed. In his bright and deep eyes, there was no emotion. Seeing Yi Futian getting closer, he asked, "My Taoist friend, have you gotten anything during this trip?" Yi Futian looked up at him, smiling, and did not respond. "Have you ever entered there?" the man asked Yi Futian. Since Yi Futian didn't answer, instead of turning around, he just asked directly. "Where is there?" Yi Futian asked. "The ancestral land." The person stared at Yi Futian and said, "Maybe I've been there," Yi Futian whispered. He came up onto the bank of river of the path. The man gave him a deep look and then flashed away in the air. Soon, the whole divine palace knew that Yi Futian walked out of the river of the path. Suddenly, the divine palace became noisy again. One after another, their bodies flickered, and the cultivators all moved in the same direction, toward where Yi Futian appeared. In the divine palace, the news made the whole palace boiling. Shen Jing of the Taishan mountain entered the ancestral land of the divine palace, the shrine. For many years, only one disciple of the divine palace had stepped into the shrine. This person was still cultivating in the ancestral shrine. Huang Zhong, the top one figure among the descendants in the upper heavens realm. Today, there was one more person. Many people in the palace were even reluctant to believe it. Some cultivators in seclusion came out and wanted to ask Yi Futian in person. At this time, in the divine palace, Yi Futian walked towards the direction of Sword Comprehension Mountain. This trip to the divine palace was perfect for him. He completed all tasks and even had unexpected gains. It was time to leave after cultivating in the divine palace for so long. However, people kept coming towards him. Around him, disciples of the divine palace appeared one after another, all staring at him. The emotion in their stares was complicated, but no one stepped forward. They all just looked at him, as if he was a monster. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian came out and headed towards Sword Comprehension Mountain. He came on this trip as a swordsman from Taishan Mountain. Besides Yaya, the others that he was acquainted with were those from Taishan Mountain, like Wan Shuyi, Luoyue, and Little Phoenix. Besides Little Phoenix, there were several others who were cultivating at Sword Comprehension Mountain, which was the place to cultivate swordsmanship. Yi Futian came out and headed towards Sword Comprehension Mountain. He came on this trip as a swordsman from Taishan Mountain. Besides Yaya, the others that he was acquainted with were those from Taishan Mountain, like Wan Shuyi, Luoyue, and Little Phoenix. Besides Little Phoenix, there were several others who were cultivating at Sword Comprehension Mountain, which was the place to cultivate swordsmanship. As for the others from Taishan Mountain, they were outside of his control. Disciples of the Divine Palace continued gathering and appearing beside him. Some disciples approached and asked, "Xinjing, did you really get into the ancestral land?" To the Divine Palace, this news was too shocking, especially for the direct disciples. They knew how difficult it was to enter the ancestral land. Now, Yi Futian claimed that he had entered the ancestral land. One could imagine the shock felt by the disciples of the Divine Palace. An outsider had stepped into their ancestral land of the Divine Palace? The elders of the Divine Palace did not stop him? Huang Zhong, who was at the ancestral land, didn't stop Yi Futian either? With Huang Zhong's realm of strength, who below Ren Hunag could surpass him? What answer you wish for is the answer you'll get. Yi Futian glanced at the other. He no longer wished to respond anymore. There were still so many questions, and if he said that he didn't go, no one wouldn't believe him. If so, there was no need to spend time chattering. The people of the Divine Palace could think whatever they wanted to. Since none of the great figures at the Divine Palace minded, the thoughts of the disciples of the Divine Palace were completely unimportant. Thus, Yi Futian did not care either. The words carved on the stone tablet in the Divine Temple perhaps were the foundation of the Divine Palace. "Brother Shin, what was in the Divine Temple of Ancestral Land?" Someone walked up to Yi Futian and asked, his eyes full of curiosity. Seeing this person, everyone was speechless for the moment. It was Zhuang Hong. This guy actually thought of exploring the secrets of the ancestral land from Shenjing. Indeed, apart from the key figures of the divine palace, probably only Huang Zhong would know what was in the ancestral land. Now that Yi Futian had gone inside, how could they not be curious? This is the secret of the divine palace. Should I keep it or tell you? Yi Futian looked at Zhuang Hong with a smile. Zhuang Hong looked stunned. He glared at Yi Futian and said in a low voice, "You are an ass." Since he said that it was the secret of the divine palace, as the direct disciple of the divine palace, how could he dare to question any further? It would amount to probing secrets of the divine palace. Why couldn't this guy just reveal a little? Just a little bit? Try hard to enter it, and there you will see the real divine palace. Yi Futian patted Zhuang Hong's shoulder, which made Zhuang Hong's eyes shine with excitement as he stared at Yi Futian. How thrilling was his suggestion! Only he was even more curious. What would the real divine palace look like? Was the divine palace that they saw a fake? I want to, but I am afraid I won't be able to, Zhuang Hong mumbled to himself. The Path River was not so easy to cross. Yi Futian didn't say anything more. It was really difficult to get through. At this time, Yi Futian stopped and saw a figure standing in front of them. He was blocking Yi Futian's way forward. Yen Sui. Yi Futian looked at the person in front of him. It turned out to be an acquaintance. This person had traveled to the heavenly mandate realm with Yi Tianyu and was a good friend of Yi Tianyu. He was a disciple of the palace lord of Divine Music Palace. Now Yen Sui, who had already entered Nirvana realm, was blocking his way. Yen Sui, disciple of Divine Music Palace. Yen Sui bowed slightly to Yi Futian, his demeanor cordial and measured. No need for formality since you are blocking the way, Yi Futian said with a smile. Blocking the road was, in itself, an act of rudeness. What can I do for you? Yi Futian asked. Recently, I have been cultivating in solitude. After I came out, I heard that a legend had appeared in the land of proving the way. I heard that Shenjing, a swordsman from Taixin Mountain and a disciple of Lord Taixin, defeated many powerful cultivators with one sword. I heard that even Li Daozi was no exception. Furthermore, he had entered the ancestral land of the Divine Palace, which is rumored to contain the ultimate method of the Divine Palace. Since Brother Shen had returned from the ancestral land, and maybe I'm overestimating my own strength, I would love to experience what Brother Shen learned in the ancestral land. Yen Sui spoke politely. Even if it was a challenge, he was still courteous, exhibiting great diplomacy. At this time, many disciples of Divine Music Palace and Yi Tianyu were also present. They looked at Yen Sui, and Yi Tianyu and Yen Sui were quite familiar with one another. Having seen the battle between Yi Futian and Li Daozi, he was afraid that Yen Shi might not come out of this battle victorious. However, Yen Sui had always been arrogant. If he wanted to try, he couldn't really stop it. So he didn't speak but looked on quietly. In fact, many people thought that Yen Sui would definitely be defeated. After all, Li Daozi was more famous than Yen Sui. Recently, Yi Futian had returned from ancestral land, so Yen Sui could not possibly be his equal. However, it was possible to see whether or not Yi Futian's strength had improved any more and whether or not he had gained anything in the ancestral land. You cannot. Yi Futian glanced at Yen Sui. His answer was straightforward, and he didn't give Yen Sui any leeway. He was also wondering, when did the people in the Divine Palace hear that he was a disciple of Lord Taixin? He had only met Lord Taixin once that day, and to call him a disciple was somewhat preposterous. What would Lord Taixin think if he knew? Would he think that Yi Futian was leading people to believe he was his disciple? Hearing Yi Futian's words, everyone in the Divine Palace was silent for a while. He was truly blunt about it. Yen Sui did not expect Yi Futian to be so frank, dismissing him with just 2 words, "You cannot." "Please advise," Yen Sui said, his voice was solemn. As his voice fell, lingering divine sounds of the great path meandered in the air. It turned into infinite musical notes, complementing the way of heaven and earth. A series of golden characters turned into terrible lightning and attacked Yi Futian. The roaring golden characters turned into a salient golden-winged rock, hacking through the void. Yi Futian was on the move, and everyone saw elusive afterimages, like golden lightning, sail across the void as a squealing sound was heard. Everyone saw that the golden remnant of the shadow passed through the golden-winged rock. Yi Futian actually directly split open the golden-winged rock using his hand in place of a sword. His entire body was dazzling, and he radiated a terrible divine light of swordsmanship. His finger pointed forward at Yen Sui. In this instant, the divine sound of the great path resonated throughout heaven and earth in harmony with Yi Futian's finger. It created a supreme swordsmanship. Divine sound. Yen Sui's expression changed to one with shock as the finger descended instantly and landed. With a popping sound, his body flew backward, and blood dripped down along his hanging arms. In that momentary confrontation, without much drama, Yen Sui bled from the corners of his mouth. His clothes were also stained with blood. His arms hung helplessly as blood continued to drip down. The hearts of many trembled. Though they could not see the swordplay clearly, they felt the divine sound and the swordsmanship. As for their true strength, it was unfathomable to many disciples of the divine palace. He has cultivated the divine sound, entered into the ancestral land, and the method of the divine palace truly exists in the ancestral land. Everyone was shocked. They focused intently on Yi Futian. If so, didn't that imply this swordsman from Taishin Mountain was stealing the arts from the divine palace? Yi Futian continued forward, walking past Yen Sui as his arms were just hanging there. He let Yi Futian walk past him, unable to do anything to stop him. Although the disciples of Divine Music Palace were not happy about it, no one tried to stop him again. With Yi Futian's strength, except for the one who was cultivating at the ancestral land, no one was certain they could stop him. Yi Futian continued ahead like a sword until he had arrived at Sword Comprehension Mountain. A person stood on top of the first mountain of Sword Comprehension Mountain like a sword from the heavens, looking down at Yi Futian. Yi Futian raised his head to look up at him. It was Li Daozi of the divine sword Li family, and the breath exuded from his body was the breath of Renhuang. Proving the way of Renhuang, Yi Futian said to himself. Whether it was a strengthening of his power or a transformation of his mind, he viewed Renhuang differently than he did before. Once, Emperor Xia and Emperor Li were legends to him, mythical figures who were unattainable. But today and right now, he felt that Renhuang was not so far out of reach. Especially when the person who had lost to him not long ago had now entered the realm of Renhuang. Naturally, he was not likely to be impressed. It was only that different people experienced the way on different timelines, and Li Daozi's realm was deeper than his. Yi Futian didn't speak. He only looked up at Li Daozi, who seemed to be waiting for him here. Li Daozi looked at Yi Futian. Although he had entered into Renhuang, Yi Futian had entered the ancestral land of the Divine Palace. Which was more difficult? Realm of Renhuang. There were many at the Divine Palace, but how many could enter the ancestral land? Therefore, there was nothing much to be proud of. Congratulations, Li Daozi said. Same. Yi Futian smiled. It looked like that Li Daozi was not here to fight. Indeed, it would be meaningless to pick a fight after the other had already entered Renhuang. Thank you for trying the sword, Li Daozi said again. He then shape-shifted into a sword and flickered away. Yi Futian smiled. This heir of the divine sword Li family was kind of interesting. He continued to move forward and entered the Sword Comprehension Mountain. Wan Shui and Luo Yue looked at him with emotions in their hearts. Since this guy came down from the mountain, he began to show his edge and was becoming more and more legendary. Was this still the Xin Jing that they knew? They hardly seemed to be the same person. Yi Futian smiled at them and walked forward until he reached the last sword mountain. The sword will float upon him, and the aurora of the sword shot out from his eyes. After a while, he turned and said to Wan Shui and Luo Yue, "Let's go back," he said. "Very well." The two nodded and went along with him. Yaya also followed quietly. As soon as they turned around and started walking, they saw that the last sword peak of Sword Comprehension Mountain was shining with a brilliant sword light that rushed toward the sky. Then, 81 sword mountains lit up at the same time. The sword chi roared and circled the heavens as if to send them off. Everyone's heart beat violently, especially those disciples from Sword Palace of the Divine Palace. Without being in the realm of the Sword Emperor, the 81 swords had been unlocked. Even the last one was the same. This was another new record. No one had done it before. What exactly did he obtain in the ancestral land of the Divine Palace? In the void, Li Daozi, who was leaving, turned his head and glanced towards Sword Comprehension Mountain, many turbulent emotions in his heart. Not an emperor, yet he unlocked the 81 swords. Compared to him, he seemed to be lesser again. This title of Sword Emperor was nothing to be proud of at all. It seemed that, in the future, he still needed to concentrate on cultivation. Yi Futian walked toward the outside of the Divine Palace, prepared to leave. Many of those who had followed him into the Divine Palace were also leaving with him. After having stayed at the Divine Palace for many days, partially for his own private reasons. However, now that what needed to be done had been done, and since he didn't choose to cultivate at the Divine Palace, it was time to go back. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. In Linshao City, it had been a long time since the guides from the Divine Palace had led the cultivators into the Sea of the Path. Since then, many had returned, bringing with them news and rumors. In Linshao City, it had been a long time since the guides from the Divine Palace had led the cultivators into the Sea of the Path. Since then, many had returned, bringing with them news and rumors. For example, in the Battle of the Proving Ground in the Sea of the Path, the strongest person was not Li Sun of the Divine Sword Li family, nor Qin Zong of the Sky-Burying God clan, nor Gai Shishir, the genius talent of the Golden Divine Nation. It was not even a disciple of the Divine Palace. Instead, it was someone that few people had heard of before. A swordsman from Taishan Mountain, Xinjing. This swordsman from Taishan Mountain, who was famed in one battle, had defeated all enemies in the land of proving the way. He alone had plundered the divine tree of comprehension. Because of him, everyone from Taishan Mountain was able to get into the divine tree to comprehend. Afterward, as many cultivators had entered the Divine Palace, less and less news made way to Linshao City. Furthermore, although many had returned, those key characters, such as Xinjing, who became famous in the one battle, as well as Gai Shishir and Qin Zong, had not been seen since. Could it be that they had all entered the Divine Palace to cultivate? Many had already left, but some were still cultivating in Linshao City, waiting for news. They wanted to see what would happen this time. Naturally, all the top forces were stationed at Linshao City as well. At this time, on the coast of the Sea of the Path, many walked on the beach and some enjoyed a drink or two in the taverns, looking out over that vast Sea of the Path. It was said that this sea was endless. The Divine Palace was located above the Fei Mountain of the Sea of the Path, but for those who were not disciples of the Divine Palace, unless taken by guides, there was no other way to enter the Divine Palace. Although there were countless who longed for it, they had no chance to enter. At this time, there was a sudden sound that came from the coast. Many turned their attention that way, looking in the direction of the Sea of the Path. Curiosity flashed through their eyes as they looked at the sea. Their eyes became brighter and brighter until finally, they saw in the distance, where the sea met the sky, figures sailing toward them. It was as if they were coming from the other end of the sky. They are back. Someone trembled inwardly. Those who had gone to the Divine Palace had returned from the Sea of the Path. Many heard whispers and turned to look over there. They saw that the group was not together but was made of different camps in different positions, but from a distance, it was as if they were all together. However, as they got closer, they could be seen more clearly. Cultivators of the Divine Sword Li family are here. And the cultivators of the Sky-Burying God clan. Everyone talked amongst themselves. Sure enough, it was the return of those who had gone to the Divine Palace to prove the way. It was unknown what they had gained on this trip. Who is Xinjing? Someone inquired. Many did not yet know who Xinjing was. Everyone searched and quickly, their gaze fell in one direction. Over there, Yi Futian, Wan Shuyi, and Luo Yue were together. However, there were still a few others from Taishan Mountain who were willingly following behind them. There are the people from Taishan Mountain, and the handsome figure in the front must be Xinjing. He became the apparent leader of those from Taishan Mountain. Someone pointed in the direction of Yi Futian. Suddenly, many were sizing him up. When he entered the sea of the path before, no one had noticed him. But now, he became famous because of the one battle. So, naturally, he was the focus of all the attention. Yi Futian and his party went all the way from the sea of the path, escorted by the guides from the divine palace. When everyone got to the shore, the guides from the divine palace turned around and left in the boat, carefree and at ease. Yi Futian stood on a dinghy. The wind from the sea caressed his robe. As the dinghy docked, he stepped off and said, "Let's go back to Taishan Mountain." "Very well." Wan Shui nodded. Yi Futian's body flickered, and he landed on the shore. The group walked forward, preparing for their trip back home. In the sea of the path, people came through the air one after another, and they all went ashore. The people of Linshao City wanted to know what happened but had no idea who they should ask. At this time, someone realized that all the cultivators had gone in the same direction. Someone's eyes sparkled, and a faint smile flashed across their face. "Quite interesting," they said. Clearly, he had realized something and immediately caught up with the group. Yi Futian and his group kept moving forward, and they quickly reached Linshao City. He did not hurry, though. Instead, his brows were knitted together. Next to Yi Futian, Wan Shui and Luo Yue took on a cold expression. Obviously, they both discovered that after they landed from the sea of the path, many did not go back but had followed them instead. Had some kind of tacit agreement had been made? Or had it been discussed in the divine palace in advance? More and more people had now gathered inside Linshao City, and many cultivators, while sensing something unusual, couldn't help but become greatly interested. It seemed that although everyone had returned from the divine palace, the matter was far from over. There was going to be a show to see. "They are here for you," Wan Shui transmitted his voice to Yi Futian. It was easy to understand that in the divine palace, Yi Futian's strength was unparalleled and that at the divine palace, it was not easy for anyone to touch him. Now that everyone had returned, they would soon be on their way back home, just as Yi Futian would also go back to Taishan Mountain. If they did not make a move now, they would not have another chance. No one would forget that Yi Futian, while in the land of proving the way, had taken many fruits of the way himself. Those fruits were fruits that could form the body of the Great Path. It was especially helpful to impact the realm of Renhuang. In addition, Yi Futian had obtained the inheritance of the Divine Palace in the ancestral land of the Divine Palace, which was equally alluring to the others. Therefore, if everyone wanted to make a move on Yi Futian together, it would not be so unexpected. Yi Futian nodded as he understood that as long as the people of the divine capital of Xiling was there, Luo Yuming must have hated him and wanted to slaughter him mercilessly. Now, the people of the divine capital of Xiling were in the dark. Ngai Shishir of the Golden Divine Nation had followed along as well. In addition, there were some other cultivators whom Yi Futian didn't even know. They had fought for the fruits of the way in the land of proving the way with him. Their realms were all unfathomable, and they were characters who had reached the top of the Saint Plain. They all desired the fruits. Presumably, they already had the same idea, and now that they had left the Divine Palace, they wouldn't want to miss the opportunity again. Yi Futian not only did not hurry to escape but slowed down his pace instead, casually walking around the city. His spiritual will shrouded his surroundings. Unconsciously, the space where Yi Futian was became somewhat suppressing for others, and those around him pulled away. It was as if they could predict what would happen. "You don't need to follow me," Yi Futian said. His body suddenly accelerated. He ditched Wan Shui and the others in an instant. Luo Yue saw this and pointed forward, but Wan Shui caught her hand and shook his head. If those who were to attack were the top genius figures, they wouldn't be of great use to him. Except for Wan Shui's extraordinary comprehension of swordsmanship, everyone else might actually become Yi Futian's burden. And with Yi Futian's unparalleled strength, even if he was on his own, it was far easier to deal with him than with them. That, at least, there wouldn't be any constraints. Yi Futian walked forward alone, sword will whistling around him. His spiritual will shrouded the vast void around him. The wind and clouds roared above the sky, and there was a terrible death light lurking about. There were even places where bright golden divine light shot out, falling down with frightening breath. In the void, Gai Shirshir and the other cultivators were there. Yi Futian wouldn't be able to get away so easily. He took away the fruits of the way and entered the ancestral land of the divine palace. He was not a disciple of the divine palace. Thus, even if he was taken, it would have nothing to do with the divine palace. Moreover, they also wanted to know what secrets were hidden in the ancestral land of the divine palace. The divine thunder rolled above the sky like the apocalypse was upon them. Thunder clouds roared, blocking the sun overhead. A mighty power of Renhuang permeated and cascaded down, exuding a strong sense of threat. Shenjing, you alone took possession of the fruits of the way, a greedy act. Since you don't cultivate in many of the methods, why don't you give up some of the fruits, and we'll leave? A voice said from the void, obviously unwilling to start a war with Yi Futian. However, for the opportunity of proving the way, they had to fight for it. The might of the Renhuang divine implement. Yi Futian glanced up at the void. The land of proving the way strictly forbade the use of Renhuang-level divine implements. But in reality, many of those who entered the Sea of the Path were powerful figures who were equipped with Renhuang-level divine implements. Now, outside of the Sea of the Path, if it was strength alone, no one could best Yi Futian. But this was a pillage, who would care to be fair? Clearly, any means would be used. Yi Futian's expression was cold and indifferent. Sword will circled his body, and there was murderous intent in his eyes. They were out of the land of proving the way, and they were all out of the divine palace. Were they still unwilling to give up? The fact that this person was in possession of a Renhuang-level divine implement didn't bother him. What alarmed him was that someone like Gai Shirshir, whose divine implement must be supremely powerful, was surely extremely powerful. And these people were staring at him. They could strike at any time. Respectfully, I would like to advise everyone to leave now, and I will forget that this ever happened. However, if you make a move, I will see that as an attempt on my life. For those people, I will kill without exception. Yi Futian's voice was extremely cold. If these people were serious about threatening his life, he would be merciless. As soon as I have the fruit, I will leave immediately. I only want one, the man in the void said in a cold and indifferent voice. Yi Futian's spiritual will captured and locked onto the speaker. It was a middle-aged cultivator holding a divine hammer. Thunder and lightning filled the sky aggressively and with absolute dominance. Divine light of infinite thunder and lightning of heaven and earth gathered and turned into a chain of thunder. At this time, Yi Futian looked up at the divine thunder tumbling above the sky. Bright sword light of murder shot out from his eyes, piercing the void and into the other man's eyes. When the middle-aged man saw those eyes, he felt that his spiritual will was sliced through by swordsmanship. It was glaring and blinding. You asked for Yuet, a cold voice sounded in his mind, making him feel a very strong threat. At the same time that the voice fell, Yi Futian's body turned into an afterimage. Its dazzling sword light traversed the void and rushed into the thundering sky with extreme speed. The middle-aged man changed the expression on his face. The divine thunder was extremely violent. He raised his arm and blasted out divine light of thunder that swept through the void, but the residual shadow blinked and disappeared. A very slight sound emerged as the destructive thunder rolled and roared between heaven and earth, but the man's eyes showed tremendous fear. The divine implement fell from his hands. He held his neck with both hands as a crack appeared, and blood flowed out and stained his hands red. The sword was that fast. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. In the void, the sword in Yi Futian's hand was stained with blood as he looked at the figure falling from the sky. This strike not only slashed the throat but also contained the power to slash the soul, so the other was unable to save himself. In the void, the sword in Yi Futian's hand was stained with blood as he looked at the figure falling from the sky. This strike not only slashed the throat but also contained the power to slash the soul, so the other was unable to save himself. Now that these many cultivators had come to suppress him in unison, wanting to leverage divine implements to smite him and take away the fruits, If he didn't make an example of him, they would most likely be undeterred. His hand made a grabbing motion in the air, and Yi Futian captured the divine implement of the other, then took it as his own. That suffocating will of the way still shrouded the space, but no one wanted to be that bold again. It was as if they were cowed by Yi Futian's sword. A sword traversed the void and directly slashed the throat of someone who was at the top nirvana plane, holding the Renhuang divine implement. After having cultivated in the ancestral land of the divine palace, Yi Futian should be even stronger than when he fought with Li Daozi. His sword was no longer confined to the fleeing years of the divine will. The sword that had been deployed just now was the ultimate fast sword. Those who want to die, continue as you wish, Yi Futian said as he walked forward, holding the sword with one hand. He stepped into the void, and the vast void resonated with the nether swordsmanship. It was extremely sharp. The sword will of the heavens clamored. In Linshao City, in the vast and endless area beneath the sky, countless people were shocked. Many swordsmen felt that their swords and their own sword will were also resonating with that swordsmanship. It was as if all the swords of the world were about to be controlled by it. Shenjing, on this trip to the divine palace to prove the way, everyone competed for the fruits of the way, which was the opportunity bestowed by the divine palace. People of all principalities were to share the opportunity, but you snatched all the fruits for yourself. You were selfish, and you didn't think about anybody else, said a cold and indifferent voice. The speaker was Gai Shirshir. He stood higher up in the void as the golden divine light of his body cascaded down. Yi Futian's sword deterred all the cultivators, and no one dared to come forward. It looked like he had come out himself. But in reality, what he wanted was not as simple as the fruits of the way. After hearing Gai Shirshir's words, many felt the same sense of outrage. This Yi Futian was indeed too domineering. He had seized many fruits of the way. He had taken advantage of the opportunity from the divine palace to prove the way. This rather selfish behavior was unjustifiable to the others. Yi Futian glanced up at the sky, and a sarcastic smile flashed in his sharpened eyes. He said, "What a joke. If it weren't for me, other people could obtain the fruits? Don't forget who occupied the divine tree of comprehension at the time. Who had gotten it then? You were one of them. Exactly whose way did I block when I went alone to take from the divine tree of comprehension? Gai Shirshir, if you want to fight, then fight. Don't bother encouraging the others to die along with you. It's really beneath your reputation and the divine nations," Yi Futian said sarcastically. He knew of the reputation of the Golden Divine Nation, and Gai Shirshir's talent was truly outstanding. However, his conduct was rather unbecoming. Swordsman Li Daozi of the Divine Sword Li family, in comparison, was more straightforward and was not faking anything. "You asked to fight. I will oblige you," Gai Shirshir said loud and clear. His voice shook the void. As his voice fell, golden divine lights descended from the sky, seemingly transforming into many golden divine spears that slaughtered downward. A terrifying divine power descended. Giant faces appeared in the sky. They were golden faces. There were faint traces of ancient golden gods in the sky. They sighed. A mighty will of the way came down and shrouded Yi Futian. Gai Shirshir took out a divine implement, which was a golden spear. The divine light that puffed out from within seemed to be able to break through the heavens above. Just the golden brilliance that it released was enough to hurt the eyes of those who beheld it. Gai Shirshir, at this moment, under the glory of the golden divine spear, seemed to be covered in golden armor. He looked just like a god of war would. The clothes on his body were shining and shimmering with a golden luster. How strong is the divine implement? Many raised their hands to shield their eyes. Even though they were hundreds of miles apart, the people of Linshao City felt it as their eyes were being stung by the divine light of that divine implement. The might of Wei contained there was unfathomable in its horrific power. Between heaven and earth, the golden divine light flowed and converged upon the spear. The golden divine spear seemed to be burning with the golden divine light. Yi Futian's eyes were extremely grave. What mighty power was the golden divine nation? They were one of the most powerful forces in the upper heavens realm, definitely among the top 3. Outside of the divine palace, There was no other principality that dared to say that it could crush the golden divine nation. One could only imagine what powerful divine implement the golden divine nation would bestow upon Gai Shir, who was the finest of its descendants. No other Renhuang divine implement would be comparable. At the beginning of the year, I went to Taishan Mountain to visit Lord Taishan. Even now, I am reluctant to smite the people of Taishan Mountain. If you were not so greedy and had been willing to divide the fruits equally, I might have forgiven you, Gai Shir said. There was a righteous air about him. He acted as if he was serving justice in this matter. Since when does a loser dare to be so arrogant? Yi Futian said mockingly. Upon hearing his words, Gai Shir raised the divine spear. Its might of divine light pierced the void. Golden divine light shot out from his eyes as he replied coldly, "Since you are hard-headed and refuse to come to your senses, the spear of the gods will represent the will of the gods. The divine light will wash away your sins." His voice was solemn, like a real god. Above the sky, many divine illusions let out a sigh. In an instant, the pressure of might soared to the limit. This kind of unparalleled power was unrivaled below Renhuang realm. Even those at the top of the Nirvana plane who surrounded Yi Futian were terrified. Gai Shir, at this moment, was too frightening. If he launched his attack against them, he would be unstoppable. There was also what Gai Shir had said. It seemed as if those words were from the powerful divine nation, from divine general who had served under Donghuan the Great. Only those kinds of characters could have such a vision to speak such aspirational words. The spear of the gods would represent the will of heaven, and the divine light would wash away all sins. The divine light bloomed as the divine spear in Gai Shir's hand pierced toward Yi Futian. With the sigh of the divine god, all the divine lights penetrated the sky and earth. They fell at the same time, covering the sky and shielding the sun. They slammed toward Yi Futian's body in an instant. Sword screamed in the sky, and infinite sword will of the world resonated and turned into a sword of slaughter, which penetrated the void. It collided with the divine light and collapsed and shattered together. A terrible storm of destruction manifested in the void as the endless golden divine light sprinkled down. Yi Futian felt a strong oppressive force, and those golden divine lights seemed to be inexhaustible, suppressing him. What was even more terrifying was that Gai Shir came with the divine spear through the void, and the divine spear stabbed out forcefully, intending to nail Yi Futian to the void. Looking at the dazzling figure that bathed in the golden divine light, Yi Futian had no doubt that Gai Shir would really kill him if he wanted to. His daring confidence came from the power of the golden divine nation that feared nothing and no one. The void seemed to split as the golden divine spear opened up a road of the great path. Yi Futian controlled the flow of the sword river in the great path, but everything was still annihilated and pulverized. He was unable to block the power of the divine spear. Even if Gai Shir was not able to mobilize too much of its power, as a supreme Renhuang divine implement, the spear was still extremely fearsome. Under the spear of the gods, everything would be pulverized. In an instant, it had already descended on Yi Futian. Many people endured the sting to continue looking at the battlefield. Under the dazzling divine light, it was almost difficult to see what was happening. With this blow, would the magnificent swordsman from Taishan Mountain perish? Bang! A dull sound came out, shattering the sky and earth as the divine light exploded. It swept out toward the external surroundings and turned into a terrible light screen of the great path. Many couldn't help but continue staring there. The golden divine spear did not pierce through Yi Futian's body. Around Yi Futian, an immense and sacred divine elephant appeared. It let out a booming sound. At this moment, the great path seemed to collapse and shatter. The roars continued resounding between heaven and earth. The towering divine elephant stood like a demon god. An inexhaustible demon god's brilliance flowed through the heavens. Yi Futian's whole body was shining, and the bones of the supreme elephant emperor integrated into the life spirit of the divine elephant so that the battle form of the life spirit contained the incredible power of the demon emperor. Gai Shir's attack with the most powerful Renhuang divine implement forced him to resort to the power of the divine elephant. Gai Shir himself was one of the top geniuses in the upper heavens realm. Coupled with the great divine implement of the golden divine nation, how powerful could he be? Anyone under Renhuang could be killed. Therefore, Yi Futian could only summon the power of the supreme bones of the divine elephant emperor to counter the slaughter from the other's divine spear. Suffocating pressure of might enveloped the sky, and countless eyes were fixed in the direction of the battlefield. What was that? Life spirit. Divine elephant life spirit. Wasn't Xin Jing a swordsman from Taishan Mountain? His life spirit seemed to be more than just sword. But, at a critical point, he no longer contended with just sword alone, instead deploying the life spirit of the divine elephant. In this life spirit, it also seemed to be integrated into the magic of the demon emperor, which accounted for its incredible defense power, which could block the attack of the divine spear. This is the power of the divine elephant. I have heard that the land of the demon realm in the heavenly mandate realm is where the divine elephant clan resides. What an incredible ability! Among those who watched, there were some who were well informed. A look of surprise hung on their faces. Was Xin Jing from heavenly mandate realm? Divine elephant. Gai Shishir also looked down at Yi Futian. His golden eyes were extremely sharp. He asked, "Who are you?" The sound of elephants trumpeting oscillated in the void, just like the sound of the great path. The sky seems to be crushed under this sonorous sound. Bang! With a loud boom, the divine elephant stepped into the sky, repelling Gai Shishir's body with its shockwaves. Yi Futian raised his fist and blasted out. It was divine elephants split the sky. Giant shadows of divine elephants trampled across the sky. The fist aurora suppressed the void, and the divine light upon Gai Shishir continued to shine. The divine spear in his hand continued to strike, and countless divine spears collided with the divine elephants and fist aurora. The battlefield where the two made their exchanges gave out loud rumbling sounds. So powerful! Everyone's heart trembled. Gai Shishir had released the sigh of the divine god, and he couldn't be overpowered even with the use of such terrifying divine implements. He had even been repelled while Yi Futian continued his counterattacks. Such combative power was definitely at the top of nirvana. Few possessed such strength. The two separated. Yi Futian wore an expression of cold indifference, and Gai Shishir looked at him as cold murderous intent flashed through his golden eyes. It seems that there are other secrets you carry. If so, the inheritance of the divine palace and the fruits of the way definitely should not be taken by you. As he finished speaking, his eyes glanced at those who were present. He asked, "What are you waiting for? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." As Gai Shishir's words fell, a force of destruction around him shrouded Yi Futian. As Gai Shishir's words fell, a force of destruction around him shrouded Yi Futian. With Gai Shishir as the leader, then Horde was a little encouraged. But their goal was the fruits of the way, not to kill Yi Futian. If he were killed, the next task would be for Gai Shishir. Many speculated that Yi Futian was a secret disciple of Lord Taishan. Under such circumstances, they would not harm him. Among those who came for the slaying, the cultivators from the divine capital of Xiling were also there. Luo Yuming, who was severely injured by Yi Futian in the past, was hidden in the darkness. A strong death current circulated around Luo Yuming, wrapping him within on Luo Yuming's body. A strong will of death gathered, like a god of death, with an extremely dangerous atmosphere. Those ghostly eyes stared at Yi Futian below, and there was murderous intent in his eyes. The strength of this man from Taishan Mountain was so great to the point that it made him a little alarmed. Even Gai Shishir could not kill him when he took out the divine spear. Yi Futian looked at the cultivators from all areas. People in the Saint Plain had a stable state of mind and often acted with decisiveness, which was being demonstrated at this moment. Even though they were risking their lives and under great danger, these people still refused to give up and wanted to loot the fruits of the way. This state of mind was resolute and decisive. He had killed one of them, and it still did not deter them. "I will give you one last chance. Those who haven't attacked, I will never pursue this matter further." Yi Futian's voice was indifferent, yet it exuded an extremely dominant spirit. It seemed that even with all the powerful cultivators teamed up against him, he was still confident that he was invincible. This kind of boldness, what peerless magnificence! Countless people in Linshao City looked up into the sky. They were all quite shaken. Who would have thought that a swordsman from Taishan Mountain could be so magnificent in the face of so many powerful cultivators aiming to take his life? He was calm and confident. It seemed as if those who were around him would fall behind so that he could face the strong enemies alone. One man faced many. What strength must he possess? It was important to note that those who besieged him were extremely fearsome characters, even including top genius talent from the Golden Divine Nation like Gai Shirshir. Even so, his arrogance could not be restrained. Yi Futian's words faded, but no one moved. All those who were surrounding him for the kill were of the Nirvana plane, and they could hardly be threatened by words alone. The destructive might of the Way was still powerful, and it enveloped Yi Futian's body. It seemed that with a single thought, an attack could be launched. Yi Futian's eyes swept toward the crowd, and when he saw that no one vacillated, he knew that this battle would end in a bloodbath. It's not easy to cultivate in the Great Path. The Nirvana realm is only a step away from proving the Way. The fruits of the Way are not a determining factor, Yi Futian said. Is this necessary? As his voice fell, and the sound of elephant hollering could be heard through heaven and earth. The dazzling golden divine elephant engulfed the Way of heaven and earth. Its majestic torso was still expanding, and it was erected between heaven and earth. The divine elephant stepped into the void and deployed the divine elephant stomping the sky. At this moment, countless cultivators in Linshao City let out a muffled groaning sound. As their hearts and spirits were shaking, their blood was roiling with their breath. Whether it was their body or their mental state, they were enduring an unparalleled power of repression. It was as if the great path in the world was suppressing them, holding them there in place. They wanted to move but found that it was difficult even to lift their feet. Even their hands were trembling. Their hearts were beating quickly, and they looked toward Yi Futian, who was in the void. Yi Futian's whole body was dazzling with divine light, and there was a celestial shadow blooming behind him. It seemed to be possessed a celestial soul. With the divine elephant stomping the sky, they felt it step directly on them, leaving their flesh and spiritual soul both suppressed. At the same time, a space will of the Way was covering the endless space. At this moment, the entire world seemed to be suppressed and solidified, on the verge of stopped flowing. In the void, all eyes were fixed on Yi Futian. Everyone's expression was very grave. One step to suppress the void. This was to suppress the great path, the Way of space. Yi Futian's body moved. He crossed the void in a single step and walked toward a person. The man's eyes gazed at Yi Futian, whose figure continuously enlarged in his pupils. It was as if this far distance was within reach. His entire body started burning up, turned into a war god of flame. It broke through that suppressive force. There were flames of Renhuang grade that flowed and moved toward Yi Futian to swallow him. Yi Futian blasted out a punch. It was the divine elephant void-splitting fist, whose destructive force of the great path destroyed everything. Under the guidance of the celestial soul attraction, all spirit souls were destroyed and suppressed. An explosive sound came out, and everyone saw a ball of fire erupting. It was a Renhuang grade divine implement. It fell down from the sky. As for that cultivator of Nirvana realm, his soul and spirit dispersed completely, and he disappeared entirely. One punch destroyed everything, leaving nothing left. Those below watched this punch, and they were greatly afraid. Just how terrifying was its power? When the other cultivators saw this, their expression changed, and their hearts were pounding. They had all broken out of the bondage of the might of Wei and launched a simultaneous attack on Yi Futian. Many destructive methods came toward Yi Futian, trying to entomb him. However, when the attacks descended, they seemed to get close to Yi Futian but were somehow unable to touch him. At this moment, many people had the illusion of beyond reach. Again, the utilization of space will of the Way. But the brilliant divine light of space was shining, but Yi Futian's body had disappeared from where he was. As those methods and blasted together, causing the eruption of a shocking destructive force. Yi Futian had already completely detached himself from the attacks and appeared on high ground. But at this time, a golden divine light descended from the sky, which was the strongest among those who besieged him. It was Gai Shirshir. The golden divine spear penetrated the void, bringing down with it the endless golden divine light and came straight down, aiming for Yi Futian's head. Yi Futian walked in the sky. The earth shook, and the sky roared as both of his fists broke through the air at the same time, blasting out infinite aurora of the fist. The radiant will of the fist punched through the void and collided with those golden divine lights that were coming at him. Just as Yi Futian and Gai Shirshir confronted each other, there was a sudden intrusion of death will. Infinite light of darkness appeared around Yi Futian, breaking through the air in an instant. It seemed to be able to lock onto his spiritual soul and move towards him, trying to slaughter him. At a glance, it was endless darkness that covered this space. This endless flow of dark death current was like countless nails, which caused a shock to his celestial soul. It seemed as if it was nailed in the void. Countless death air currents came for the kill at the same time, like countless nails that descended simultaneously. These attacks were all invisible attacks, unconcerned with the power of offense or defense. Their only aim was the spiritual soul. The celestial soul behind Yi Futian fluttered, and there were traces of dark will that enveloped the celestial soul and flowed inside Yi Futian's body. His eyes swept in one direction, and he saw Luo Yuming, the prince of divine capital of Xiling. At this time, his celestial soul seemed to have been peeled away from the body and turned into a god of death. This attack had precisely been released from there. Yi Futian's celestial soul shook, and a brilliant celestial light erupted. There were actually countless air currents of swordsmanship directly blooming from the celestial soul as the celestial soul attraction stamped the sword into the celestial soul attack. There seemed to be endless swords of spiritual soul sweeping out, destroying those death currents. Simultaneously, the force of Gai Shirshir's attack descended again, as well as his person, carrying with him the golden divine spear and the power of the divine gods to attack at close range. Its might was unbelievably aggressive. The divine elephant stomping the sky. Yi Futian raised his eyes and glanced toward the other. One step, and thousands of elephants rushed across, crushing the void. They slammed toward Gai Shirshir's spear. Yi Futian disappeared as a sword like a brilliant streamer of light, deftly avoiding the attack that was forming the other side. With a wave of his hands in the void, suddenly, countless swords between heaven and earth were born. Many looked up at him and saw that the sword light was shining brightly. There seemed to be many sword rivers of the great path that appeared to flow between heaven and earth. His figure disappeared again and went in another direction. It was the one who had just attacked him. That cultivator's expression changed slightly. The strength exhibited by Yi Futian was also the one that he was afraid the most. Clad in armor, his entire body burst out with an unparalleled heavy force. He walked like a war god of the great path. His body was like a Renhuang battle form. With the magnification of the divine implements, it was not any less than the true Renhuang battle form. His entire body erupted with divine light. Both fists blasted through the sky and earth, directly slamming toward Yi Futian, who was zooming in. The void seemed to have been punched through and pulverized. Its strength was immeasurable. But Yi Futian did not make an effort to evade it. Instead, his sword-like figure moved directly down. There was a resonance of thousands of swords between heaven and earth, and the terrible sound of elephants rumbling. The great path was won. There was an immense sense of swordsmanship in his body that turned his body into a sword. Bang! The fist was penetrated and destroyed. A sword light crossed the void, and that nirvana figure disappeared completely, save for a sword mark left in the void. Another Renhuang divine implement, which was picked up by Yi Futian. Hunt to kill! Everyone's heart was pounding. Cultivators were hunted down by Yi Futian, one after another. He had temporarily avoided the strongest of them all, which was Gai Shirshir, and escaped being tied down. He could not defeat Gai Shirshir instantly, but he was able to kill any others in seconds. Gai Shirshir's attack was unable to restrain Yi Futian, nor could anybody else. Many people looked at the figure in the void and thought that Taishan Mountain had really produced an extraordinary genius talent. He had used his own power to contend with all the powerful cultivators. Not only was he not at a disadvantage, but he was hunting the others one by one. This kind of people was too terrifying. At this time, Futian standing there with his hands forming the seal, the ancient tree of the world swaying within him. The blood inside of him howled, and the will of the way tossed and turned as a majestic breath erupted from his body. Behind Futian, majestic figures akin to divine gods could vaguely be seen. Many divine elephants surrounded him, trampling wildly between heaven and earth to block the attack from outside. As he closed his eyes, his spiritual will radiated outward, shrouding the boundless space. At this moment, the swords on many people in Linshao City were trembling. Some even flew out of the sheaths. It was as if the sword will in their bodies was flowing outside of their controls. Above the sky, countless divine swords appeared, circling around heaven and earth, thus wrapping the vast and boundless space within it. Futian's body seemed to be the master of all swords, and the infinite divine sword resonated because of him. Divine swords, one after the other, ran through the void, tearing it, like a meteor sword, leaving sword marks between heaven and earth. He meant to kill them as a group. Everyone's heart pounded. Wan Shi watched from afar. His pupils contracted as he stared at the scene. He felt the real fleeting of years. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Inside Futian's body, the dazzling glory of swordsmanship gleamed. Shadows of swords appeared. It was as if all the veins of his body had turned into veins of swords, and his blood had turned into a sword river. His entire body was now the sword that ruled all other swords. Inside Futian's body, the dazzling glory of swordsmanship gleamed. Shadows of swords appeared. It was as if all the veins of his body had turned into veins of swords, and his blood had turned into a sword river. His entire body was now the sword that ruled all other swords. Sword body of the great path. Many people were trembling in their hearts. Was this an indication that the sword body of the great path was about to be forged? Thousands of swords returned against the current. It was no longer the swordsmanship that was released from Futian, but an infinite sword that was born from heaven and earth, coming toward Futian. This could only be accomplished by someone who had gathered the soul of the way, but Futian clearly had not yet reached that level of intensity. This could only mean that his spiritual will was stronger than the power of ordinary men. Countless divine swords reversed as the swords locked onto the sky. Roaring sounds of the great path came out of all the cultivators, and an amazing power exploded forth. Some raised their hands to attack, destroying the coming swords, but several other swords came toward them as they tore the void, leaving a sword mark as they continued to the target. He continued to attack but saw more and more swords. Left and right, top and bottom, there were divine swords on all sides. It was endless. This scene caused a great disturbance in Futian's heart. It was as if he was facing the illusion of the divine wheel of the Renhuang swordsmanship. Bang bang bang. One sword could not execute the killing, but what about countless swords? Moreover, the sword was getting stronger, turning into a storm that countered the great path, destroying all methods. It was not just him, but everyone was contending with this imprisoning swordsmanship. A swordsmanship storm appeared in every direction, and this swordsmanship storm was resonating with one another as if to become a giant storm that would annihilate the existence of everything. The people in Linshao City looked up into the sky. At this time, there were countless divine swords. Futian was standing in the center of the storm, and those countless divine swords resonated with his body as the center. It's so strong. Everyone trembled. What had they experienced in the divine palace? Gai Shishir also stared at Futian with indifferent eyes. Golden divine spears were flowing around his body and collided with the swords. The extremely holy and godlike figure stood there and could not be shaken. Such swordsmanship alone from Futian would naturally not affect him, but if this continued, the others would end up in great misery. The golden divine spear was raised, and the divine light shot out from it. However, at this time, Yi Futian's eyes opened, and an extremely overbearing divine aura came out of them. He raised his hand, and suddenly, the sky was covered with suffocating pressure. His fist blasted toward the front, dazzling with divine light, but no one knew what he intended to do. When he blasted out the aurora of the fist, he stepped out simultaneously and crossed the void in a single step. He appeared in front of a man who was fighting against the swordsmanship. The divine spring had already penetrated the void and was charging downward. Boom! There was no hesitation. Under the shocking sound of elephant trumpeting, as thousands of divine elephants rushed by, the great path collapsed. The man's body was directly punched through as his soul scattered, and he was knocked away, powerlessly into the distance. Dominating. Everyone's heart trembled. Under the attack of the divine sword, coupled with the power of the divine elephant, it was invincible. Yi Futian continued to step forward. He appeared in another spot in an instant. Only those cultivators who had Renhuang divine implements dared to confront Yi Futian. Therefore, even though his swordsmanship was superior, it was only able to trap them but not eradicate them. However, Yi Futian, whose body contained the bones of the supreme divine elephant emperor, had a close-quarter attack that was enough to break his opponent's defense. Bang, bang, bang. A series of dull sounds came out, and each sound was accompanied by the fall of a Nirvana plane character, which struck fear in people's hearts. These were all people who were qualified to enter the divine palace. None of them was an easy opponent, as they were all of the strongest existence in Nirvana realm. But at this moment, they seemed to have become mediocre, which was the result of the suppression of their talent as well as the crushing of their combat power. Any genius talents would still look unremarkable in front of peerless characters. All the cultivators seemed to be reduced into supporting roles at the moment, probably just to accentuate the name of Shunjing from Taishan Mountain. It was unknown how many died in the continuous attacks. Those who were still resisting Yi Futian's swordsmanship finally felt a strong sense of fear. Yi Futian was not joking, he was killing for real. Furthermore, he also could battle. If they continued to fight, it would probably only spell death for them. Let's go. Many people thought about leaving at the same time. Although they had a tenacious state of mind and were willing to risk fighting to obtain the fruits of the way, the situation now could no longer be solved by taking a risk. Yi Futian had demonstrated superior fighting power that was enough to kill them all. Continuing to fight could only mean death. Those who had not yet perished kept pulling back, ready to evacuate from the battlefield. Yi Futian glanced at them, but the swordsmanship still attacked forward, chasing them, forcing them to continue their retreat into a distant area so that they disappeared from this battlefield. Yi Futian did not continue to pursue them. He was surrounded and attacked, and he had no choice but to kill his opponent. However, he knew that killing them would not benefit him at all. He turned his eyes in a direction, then stepped into the void. The sky oscillated as the divine elephants rushed through the sky. He walked toward a man who was retreating. The man was Luo Yuming, and this was not the first time that the prince of the divine capital of Xiling had provoked him. The Renhuang divine implement he was equipped with seemed to have the effect of attacking and destroying spiritual souls. Luo Yuming was also retreating. He had realized that it couldn't be done. Even the joint attack could not ensnare Yi Futian. The combat power exhibited by this man too terrifying. He was and stronger beyond imagination. There was indeed superior and powerful Renhuang magic in his body. Under such circumstances, he had to give up. However, at this time, he saw Yi Futian coming toward him, which caused Luo Yuming's pupils to shrink. Did this guy only pursue him? A giant figure of the underworld appeared above the sky, and the world was rendered dark and dim as the will of death shrouded the world. It seemed that there was a pair of dead eyes that stared at Yi Futian. Death will directly invaded and rushed into his eyes to corrupt all his veins, nerves, and internal organs so that they lost their vitality. However, Yi Futian not only ate the fruit of life but also swallowed the fist of life in the land of proving the way. If the wills of the way were to be ranked, then will of life would rank the highest, as its abundant vitality seemed to turn into a sea of life inside the body, flooding and eradicating the invading will of death. Luo Yuming looked badly. His palms were waving, and there appeared to be a formation of the nether matrix in the void, with numerous dark currents shot out from the matrix. Yi Futian felt that his spiritual soul was exposed. Those dark currents, like nails, nailing onto his spiritual soul. This attack was extremely strange. It was as if the spiritual soul was not strong enough. He would have been killed directly. Yi Futian's spiritual soul bloomed. The divine elephant inside his body roared, and the divine sword was unleashed. At the same time, he raised his hand and tightened his fist as if taking hold of the nether shadow in the void. Luo Yuming's body stiffened, and he felt that his spiritual soul was imprisoned. Just as he had attacked Yi Futian's spiritual soul, the same tactic was used on him by the other. Yi Futian continued stepping forward, and each step seemed to suppress the great path, destroying the spiritual soul. Countless divine elephants trampled between heaven and earth, creating a scene that was shocking to behold. Luo Yuming felt tightness all over his body, enduring a terrible force of oppression. But Yi Futian's body is still radiant, and the will of the way was extremely abundant. This was something that Luo Yuming could not compare with at all. Both of Yi Futian's fists blasted out simultaneously, and explosive sounds continuously came from Luo Yuming's body. It was as if he had been pierced through while in the air, and the shadow of the underworld was also shattered in the void. Luo Yuming let out a shrill scream as his body was flying through the air. Blood came out of his mouth, and he looked terribly pale. "How dare you?" At this moment, a cold voice came from above the sky. An incredibly powerful great path descended. Its might pressed against Yi Futian's body, locking him in. Several supremely strong characters descended from the sky like divine gods. The breath released from them was the breath of Renhuang. Those who surrounded Yi Futian today all possessed extraordinary status and came from great principalities. Among them, two were the strongest, Gai Shishir and Luo Yuming. One was the strongest descendant of the Golden Divine Nation, and the other was the prince of the divine capital of Xiling. Those who had guarded them before on their journey to the divine palace had not left but had always remained inside Linshao City. But all the cultivators had started to attack Yi Futian, so they merely watched on the side in secret. However, now that Yi Futian had threatened Luo Yuming's life, they couldn't remain on the sidelines any longer, so they walked over to reveal themselves. Yi Futian was experiencing an extremely powerful oppressive force that seemed to imprison his spiritual soul. As the death will descended, his entire body slowed down, and his mind became dim. It was then that a strong murderous intent came behind Yi Futian. Gai Shishir had not been made any attacks because he was waiting for an opportunity. Now that the Renhuang cultivators of the divine capital of Xiling had joined the fray, this was his opportunity. "Careful!" Yaya's expression changed as she shouted her warning loudly. Wan Shuyi, Luo Yue, and the others also exclaimed in surprise, and their faces were extremely concerned. Gai Shishir of the Golden Divine Nation was supposedly a peerless and respectful figure. Still, he had employed such a low approach to unleash his most deadly attack when the other Renhuang were suppressing Yi Futian so that Yi Futian's attention was divided. Shameless! The disciples of Taishin Mountain were extremely angry. No matter what they thought of Yi Futian before, Yi Futian had treated them well in the land of proving the way. Coupled with Yi Futian's unparalleled and talented combat power, they had now all recognized Yi Futian as one of their own and admired him greatly. He was the representative of their generation of Taishin Mountain. He was much stronger than Jun Mu, as the two were not even on the same level. Presently, Taishin Mountain needed such a person to represent them to the outside world. Jun Mu and the others would only bring shame to Taishin Mountain and Lord Taishin. Under such a situation, they had already thought of Yi Futian as one of them. Upon seeing Gai Shishir's lowly ambush, there was great anger in their hearts. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The people of Linshao City were moved when they saw this scene. The Golden Divine Nation had flourished for a time and had stood at the top of the higher heavens realm. Guy Shirshir was the talented prince of the nation. How could he have known that his reputation would suffer like this? The people of Linshao City were moved when they saw this scene. The golden divine nation had flourished for a time and had stood at the top of the higher heavens realm. Guy Shirshir was the talented prince of the nation. How could he have known that his reputation would suffer like this? However, he had not hesitated to resort to underhanded tricks to kill Yi Futian. But although it was dishonorable, one could see from this just how fierce he was at heart. He was fierce to others and to himself. Even though he was an outstanding talent, he did not care about his own reputation and did not care how others saw him. He only wanted to achieve his goals. People like these were truly frightening and truly deadly. For Yi Futian, Guy Shirshir's surprise attack had been extremely deadly as well. Moreover, even when he saw Guy Shirshir attack, the Renhuang from the divine capital of Shilling kept up his pressure on Yi Futian and did not withdraw it. It seemed as if he had no other goal than to see Yi Futian die at Guy Shirshir's hands. If Guy Shirshir killed Yi Futian, then Taishan Mountain would have to seek out the golden divine nation to exact revenge. Yi Futian could naturally sense how threatening this situation was. He swept his cold gaze over the figure in the sky. The branches and leaves of the world tree life spirit flowed through every part of his body, and his divine light shone through heaven and earth. At the same time, the 10,000 bones of the divine elephant emperor were activated, and an elephant's trumpeting sound rang out through the air. There was a loud boom as the illusions of countless divine elephants wrapped around him. At the same time, the image of a lordly divine elephant covered his body. He did not have much time to react, so he could only use his most powerful defensive techniques to block Guy Shirshir's attack. Boom! There was a loud noise that made the heavens and the earth shake fiercely. Guy Shirshir drew in close to attack, and his golden divine spear pierced through countless illusions in an instant while also twisting wildly. A beam of brilliant golden light that could destroy everything pierced through the body of the divine elephant, shattering it to pieces as it wrapped around Yi Futian. Bang! The beam of golden light slammed into Yi Futian's back, its power making him stumble forward. At the same time, the Renhuang's pressure that had been oppressing him finally disappeared, but he was startled when he saw the blood staining his back. He moved forward, flying off into the distance with blood streaming from the corners of his mouth. But his eyes were still incredibly cold. And Guy Shirshir's attack was not finished yet. He continued to pursue. He could leap through space just like Yi Futian, and he was incredibly fast. He thrust out with the golden divine spear again, and beams of golden light pierced through the air, turning into more golden spears. They sought to destroy the whole area, so there was nowhere to go to avoid them. Boom! Yi Futian stepped through the air, making the sky tremble. He did not try to evade. The 10,000 bones of the divine elephant emperor let loose an intense radiance, and his world tree wrapped around his bones, making it all the same kind of power. At that moment, all the will in his body transformed into divine elephant power. It was not that divine elephant power was the strongest power that he possessed, but it was his strongest treasure. Therefore, he would use the divine elephant power so that he could use it to its fullest potential. The deed of thought comprehension glowed brilliantly as his body transformed into a divine furnace. His divine elephant life spirit burst forth as well, merging with his bones. In a flash, he seemed to transform into the inheritor of the divine elephant emperor. He formed an elephant law body that could crush the very heavens. His body became golden, and divine elephant light wrapped around him. Everyone felt their hearts tremble as they beheld this scene. The attack had not managed to seriously wound him? How powerful were this guy's defenses? He must have a law body, otherwise an attack of that magnitude would have destroyed him. He would not have been able to recover in so short a time. Bang! 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 Golden light shining with divine radiance slammed into him, but could not break through his defenses. Guy Shirshir's power descended upon him as he floated high up in the sky, looking down. He was like a celestial prince as he thrust out with his spear again and again. His attacks still did not cease. The divine light shot forward wildly, making terrible booming sounds every time it hit Yi Futian. If he were just an ordinary Nirvana-level cultivator, he would already have been destroyed by this attack. But he was not. He stood rooted firmly in place like a divine elephant. He would stagger slightly every time the spear hit him and pierce through him, making it pierce through his afterimages as well. The dazzling light arced in front of him. This level of power was enough to destroy a nirvana-level cultivator, but Yi Futian reached out with both hands and grabbed for the spear. Guy Shirshir frowned. Endless light shone from the golden divine spear as it shot towards Yi Futian. Was he trying to grab his Renhuang implement? A burst of incredible force hit Yi Futian. It was so strong because it had come from such a short distance. Yi Futian was only able to withstand it because he had formed a law body and activated the 10,000 bones of the divine elephant emperor. Bang! There was a loud noise, and Yi Futian's hands shook as he was sent flying backward. He had not managed to grab the spear. The endless light shot towards, putting him under even greater pressure. But this time, Yi Futian faced Guy Shirshir directly. He stopped moving backward and gazed at his opponent. Guy Shirshir was like a divine general, ready to conquer the world. The golden divine spear shot out, endless light flowing out of it. But unfortunately, Guy Shirshir was not strong enough to bring forth its ultimate power. Yi Futian grabbed for it with both hands again, and the mighty figure of a deity appeared behind him like a lord of the great path, suppressing everything before it. He stared at Guy Shirshir, then stepped forward. Countless divine elephants charged with him, colliding with the oncoming beams of light and destroying them all. Boom! He stepped out through the air, and images of celestial worthies and elephants appeared as he walked towards Guy Shirshir. Everyone felt their hearts trembled as they watched this. Did he want to get into close combat with him? Guy Shirshir gripped his spear. His attack power was so strong, and yet Yi Futian still wanted to fight him at close range? Perhaps it was because he knew that he had no way to destroy his opponent from a distance due to his Renhuang implement, so his only choice was to get in close. Brilliant divine light shot out of Guy Shirshir's eyes. As the light fell towards the ground, he raised the golden divine spear and thrust it out once again, right towards where Yi Futian had appeared. Countless divine elephant images were charging towards him, and they collided with the spear. Yi Futian threw a punch, and the divine elephants cracked the very air. It seemed like they could destroy anything. Bang! In the instant that their attacks collided, space itself was distorted. The people below them could no longer see the two combatants as the light of the great path pierced their eyes. As Yi Futian lashed out with his fist, the divine spear shook, and he moved in quickly from the side, striking at Guy Shirshir's body directly. Before the fist reached him, Guy Shirshir felt that his life spirit was under fierce attack. The fist was not just attacking his flesh. His face grew dark, and golden light shot out from his eyes. He swept out with his spear as he flew through the air, trying to evade Yi Futian's attack. But Yi Futian's thoughts had locked onto him, and he moved through the air with him. Guy Shirshir could not escape. Bang! Yi Futian's fist split the air as it crashed into Guy Shirshir while his golden divine spear slammed into Yi Futian at the same time. Yi Futian seemed to have done this on purpose. He had allowed his opponent to strike him so that he could get his attack in. Guy Shirshir was sent flying backward, his life spirit shaking. His golden body had been badly damaged, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The body was breaking apart, and golden blood flowed from it. Yi Futian groaned as well, but his aura was still solid. In a flash, he was moving forward again, crossing a great distance through the air. Most of the people watching down below were shocked by this. Guy Shirshir was in trouble. His attacks with his Renhuang implement were incredibly strong, but his defensive power was nowhere near as strong as Yi Futian's. He could not withstand Yi Futian's powerful attack. Yi Futian continued forward. In a flash, he had launched yet another attack. This time, as the air-splitting divine elephant fist lashed out, countless elephant images charged along with it towards Guy Shirshir, who had already been wounded. He raised his spear to block them, but Yi Futian continued to lash his fists out, and more elephants charged, making Guy Shirshir's life spirit shake uncontrollably. He groaned many times in succession as golden blood flowed out of him. Bang! Finally, there was a loud noise as a fist landed directly on Guy Shirshir's body. The spear was knocked out of his hands, and he was sent flying downwards. His face had gone pale. He still lost. Everyone trembled at this. Even with a surprise attack, he had still lost to Yi Futian. Yi Futian reached out and grabbed the golden divine spear, gripping it in his hand. He stepped forward, looking down coldly at Gai Shirshir, who had fallen to a lower part of the sky. There was murderous intent in his eyes. Boom! He stepped downwards, holding the spear. Everyone trembled as they beheld this scene. Was Yi Futian going to kill Gai Shirshir? Yi Futian transformed into a beam of light, but at that moment, another burst of the power of the great path descended. Endless golden divine spears fell from the sky. Yi Futian looked up and saw golden stone pillars descending from above, giving off a fierce roar. Boom! 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 The golden stone pillars fell, forming a golden cage around him that locked him in place. Everyone looked up into the sky and saw a group of gold-armored renhuangs descending from the sky. It seemed that Gai Shirshir had some renhuangs protecting him. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The golden armored renhuang cultivators were like gods. The brilliant light that shone from them lit up the whole area. The golden armored renhuang cultivators were like gods. The brilliant light that shone from them lit up the whole area. They stared at Yi Futian with sharp eyes. They had been watching the battle in secret. Since it was a battle between people on the same level, it had not been easy for them to interfere in favor of their prince. Besides, this battle was a kind of training for Gai Shirshir. Unfortunately, he had been defeated in the end. However, the man he was fighting was truly powerful. He possessed many different abilities. He had the ultimate technique of the divine elephants of the heavenly mandate realm, and he seemed to possess the mystical ways of the celestial gate of vast heaven. In addition, he had Lord Taishuan's fleeting divine sword and the ultimate technique of the divine palace. He was skilled with them all, and will roared throughout his body with mighty power. He had a body of the great path. In addition, his divine spirit was extraordinary. From his body to his spirit, from his attacks to his defenses, there was not a single weak point. He was almost perfect. Thus, the talented genius prince of the golden divine nation, Gai Shirshir, had lost to him. If this man did not die, he would become a great figure in the future. With the talent and strength that he had displayed today, he would not have to prove himself worthy to become a renhuang. It would only be a matter of time. Although it was difficult to break through to this level, truly great figures could not be stopped from reaching it. Yi Futian looked back at them with an ugly look on his face. More renhuang-level cultivators? These top figures whom he had originally seen off had apparently stayed in Linshao City, waiting for the Divine Palace's journey to end. The divine capital of Xiling was just like this, and so was the Golden Divine Nation. The golden pillars locked him in place, forming a golden cage around him. He could not leave. There was an extremely ugly look on his face. He rushed forward and thrust the spear he was holding directly forward, slamming it into the golden pillars and shattering them. He continued rushing forward. He had broken through a prison created by renhuang-level cultivators. Everyone watched the scene unfold in the air. This guy was truly strong. In fact, he could be said to be an absolute hero. He had defeated so many cultivators in this battle all by himself. No one was a match for him. Gai Shirshir and Luo Yuming had been defeated. In fact, they had been crushed. However, he could not crush renhuang-level cultivators. One of them glanced at his spear, then stepped forward, reaching out his hand. Suddenly, a terrible golden divine wheel appeared in his hand. In a flash, many beams of divine light shot forth from the divine wheel, transforming into chains that shot towards Yi Futian. Yi Futian's expression changed when he saw this. There were golden chains everywhere, and the divine wheel lit up the whole area. It was using all the will in the area, creating a prison with a single thought. This was the power of a renhuang-level cultivator. He had forged a divine wheel that shone with the sun and the moon. A crashing sound rang out as the endless chains descended from the sky. Yi Futian rushed through the air in a certain direction. Divine elephants charged all around him, trampling through the air, but the chains seemed to be divine. They ignored all defenses. Bang! A golden chain lashed against him. At that moment, Yi Futian could feel the great path collapse. He groaned, and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Then endless chains wrapped around him, and another chain wrenched the spear from his hands. He did all he could to hold on to it, but the chains lashed against his arm and swept the spear firmly away from him, pulling it into his opponent's hands. And his body was held in place by the endless chains that were seemingly attached to the air itself. How could he withstand the power of Renhuang's wheel of the great path? The Renhuang cultivator began to pull slowly, and the chain that had wrapped around Yi Futian began to pull him forward. He looked at his opponent with a cold expression. Are the Renhuangs of the Golden Divine Nation so cruel? Wan Shuyi stepped forward. And not only him, but the cultivators of Taishan Mountain and Yaya did as well. They had dark looks on their faces. This was simply too much. Everyone had seen clearly that in the last battle, Gai Shishir had attacked Yi Futian in order to steal his fruit of the way and had even not hesitated to launch a surprise attack. Yi Futian had been defending himself, and once he had won, the Renhuangs of the Golden Divine Nation had interfered. The Renhuang of the Golden Divine Nation swept his gaze over them. Piercing light shot out of his eyes. He said nothing and continued to pull Yi Futian towards him. Below them, Gai Shishir had risen as well. He had been wounded badly, and he was covered in blood. He looked coldly at Yi Futian. He rose slowly into the air. The Renhuang tossed the golden divine spear to him, and he reached out to catch it. At that moment, brilliant light shone down from the heavens. The Renhuang from the Golden Divine Nation's expression changed, and he looked up into the sky. At the same time, someone raised his hand and brought out a huge golden palm print into the air, where the light seemed to be coming down from. Bang! The palm print was instantly destroyed, and there was another roaring sound. Everyone saw Gai Shishir, who had been rising upward, disappear from his original place. Boom! There was a loud noise that made everyone's hearts tremble fiercely. They looked up, but the ground below them cracked, and fault lines spread out in all directions. Gai Shishir was thrown back to the ground. This time it was worse. He was trampled to the ground by a foot, and the Renhuang implement known as the Golden Divine Spear did not return to his hands. It was snatched away as it flew to him. The one who snatched it was the one who had trampled him to the ground. This, everyone's hearts trembled fiercely. Had someone else come? Moreover, they had managed to crush Gai Shishir underfoot? What kind of person was Gai Shishir? He was the most talented young cultivator of the Golden Divine Nation, and the nation's hopes were placed upon him. He was likely to be their future ruler. He could be defeated, but to be trampled to the ground was an incredible humiliation. How could someone be so casual? It was crazy. Did they not fear offending the Golden Divine Nation? Everyone stared over there. They saw that the one who had trampled him had a pair of thin legs, so thin they seemed to not have any bones. It was a woman. Though her legs were thin and weak-looking, she was filled with explosive power as she trampled Gai Shishir. She was incredibly beautiful and wore a fiery red robe. She had a heroic and valiant bearing. As she stood there tall, she was not only beautiful but also had an air of nobility about her. It was the aura of an empress. There was a hint of laziness amidst all this nobility. There was a cold smile on her fiery red lips. Who is she? Gai Shishir looked up at the woman. He looked very embarrassed to have been trampled by a woman like this. She had purposely humiliated him. Golden light exploded from him, but he was completely unable to break free. He stared at the woman who was stepping on him. He recognized her. He had seen her at Taishan Mountain. This is a good spear. She held up the golden divine spear and looked it over. Terrifying divine light shone from it. She lifted it up and aimed it at Gai Shishir, making his face turn pale. How dare you? The Renhuang from the divine golden nation's face turned ugly as he gazed at the woman coldly. She had humiliated Gai Shishir so badly. He was the strongest young person in the golden divine nation. How dare I? The woman smiled coldly. Thrust the spear down towards Gai Shishir's brow. It seemed like if she put even the slightest bit of pressure on it, she would pierce Gai Shishir's head. This is a good ritual implement, she said with a grin, but her voice had a hint of murderous intent to it. At that moment, Guy Shirshir did not dare move even an inch. His face was deathly pale. His very life was in danger. He had heard about this woman back in the Golden Divine Nation. She was crazy, extremely crazy. There was nothing that she would not do. What are you going to do? The Renhuang level cultivator from the Golden Divine Nation's expression had changed as well. What am I going to do? There was a hint of mischief in the woman's eyes as she looked at him. I should ask you what you are doing. Do you think that Taishan Mountain doesn't exist? Or do you think that the Golden Divine Nation is invincible, letting you do whatever you want? Fourth Miss, called Wan Shuyi and the others from Taishan Mountain. They were relieved of the worries that they had had previously. Now that fourth Miss was here, nothing bad would happen to Yi Futian. The Golden Divine Nation had gone too far today, so it was no wonder that fourth Miss's anger had moved her to take action. She had dragged Guy Shirshir out of the air. She was naturally the fourth disciple of Lord Taishan, the house master of Taishan. She had been the one to bring Yi Futian to Taishan Mountain. Yi Futian was locked down and could not move, but he watched the house master of Taishan with mouth and eyes wide open. This beautiful empress really had such a violent side to her? It was very beautiful, just as beautiful as the rest of her. Yi Futian realized that she was more beautiful than he had first thought. Let us both release our captives, said the Renhuang from the Golden Divine Nation to the house master of Taishan. The house master of Taishan smiled sarcastically and said, then let him go. Her opponent frowned as he stared at her. We'll let them go at the same time. You're trying to set terms? The house master of Taishan pressed the spear down, piercing Guy Shirshir's forehead down to the muscle and making a stream of blood run down his face. Guy Shirshir went even paler, but he kept his eyes open, staring at the woman. There was a cracking sound as the chains tightened, putting pressure on Yi Futian's bones, making him groan in pain. It seems as if Guy Shirshir is not important to the Golden Divine Nation since no one cares if he lives or dies. The divine spear continued down bit by bit. It seemed like it would soon pierce into the center of his head. Stop, called the Renhuang from the Golden Divine Nation angrily. Don't you care about his life? He is just a musician at Taishan Mountain. If you don't care about Guy Shirshir's life, then I don't care about his, said the house master of Taishan. Yi Futian's face darkened. She was heartless. Such a talented musician, said her opponent coldly. He must be a personal disciple of Lord Taishan. It doesn't matter if you believe me, said the house master of Taishan. I will count to 3, and if the chains have not been removed, then the strongest youth of the Golden Divine Nation will die here today. 1. 2. She did not wait for her opponent but immediately started counting. There was a clanking sound as the chains on Yi Futian's body were suddenly retracted. A look of surprise came over everyone's face. Everyone had seen that the house master of Taishan had intervened for Yi Futian's sake, but she had been right to guess that the man from the Golden Divine Nation would not dare gamble with his prince's life. The fourth great disciple of Lord Taishan was a difficult person to handle. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. After the Renhuang of the Golden Divine Nation had let Yi Futian go, he said to the house master of Taishan, will you let him go as well? After the Renhuang of the Golden Divine Nation had let Yi Futian go, he said to the house master of Taishan, will you let him go as well? The house master of Taishan moved the spear away from Guy Shirshir's forehead, then looked at the Renhuang with a smile. Don't worry. I am not as underhanded as you. I won't kill your junior. As she said this, Yi Futian flashed over to her side and said, House master. The man from the Golden Divine Nation looked at her, waiting for her to let Guy Shirshir go. She handed the Golden Divine Spear to Yi Futian and said, take it. Yi Futian hesitated, but in the end he still took it. The house master of Taishan laughed and said, the battle between the two of them is not over, it was interrupted. Continue. Yi Futian was stunned, and a look of surprise came over his face. Golden light shot out of the Renhuang from the Golden Divine Nation's eyes, and his aura swept out, covering the area. Since the prince of the Golden Divine Nation has entered into a life and death contest with you, launched a surprise attack on you, and had his Renhuang interfere, there is no need to be polite. The battle is not yet over, so you can do whatever you want. You can even kill him, the house master of Taishan said to Yi Futian with a smile. Yi Futian looked at her stupidly. He could even kill him? He could not tell how much of what the house master of Taishan was true and how much was false. Empress Yen, said the Renhuang from the Golden Divine Nation. Empress Yen was the house master of Taishuan's title. Few people knew her real name, which was Yen Mushue. After all, few people called her that, but many people knew her as Empress Yen. Although there are not many people in Taishan Mountain, we still cannot allow this kind of bullying. Big sister is here, so there's no need to be afraid, said the house master of Taishan with a smile. There was a hint of wickedness in her smile. She had called herself that again. Yi Futian's face darkened, but he still nodded. He walked in front of Gai Shishir, still holding the spear. Gai Shishir had indeed come here today, seeking Yi Futian's life. He had broken out of the cultivator's encirclement, used the golden divine spear to attack him, launched a surprise attack, and then had a Renhuang-level cultivator interfere. All along the way, he had fought with killing force. All of this had been done to kill him. He had not shown any mercy. The prince of the Golden Divine Nation had done all of this without any scruples at all. He lowered his head and looked down at Gai Shishir. The cultivators watching this scene from a distance felt their hearts tremble. They had all thought that Empress Yen would let him go. They had not thought that she would not act, but would let Yi Futian continue their previous fight. Previously, Gai Shishir had already lost, and his Renhuang implement had been taken. If they continued, he would most certainly be killed. It would be just like before. That was how the situation was shaping up before the Renhuang had appeared. Now, things were back where they had started. Blood trickled down Gai Shishir's forehead. Brilliant golden light shone in his eyes as he stared at Yi Futian. Powerful will blazed in those eyes as if he were warning Yi Futian. He was the prince of the Golden Divine Nation, the most outstanding young person there. He did not believe that his opponent would dare kill him. I really don't care whether you live or die, even if you are the strongest member of the younger generation of the Golden Divine Nation. But if I let you go after all the things you've done, I won't be able to forgive myself. So, what do you think I should do? Yi Futian asked Gai Shishir. The things that have happened here today have cancelled each other out. Let us return to our homes and cultivate, never to bother each other again, said Gai Shishir. As he said this, Yi Futian brought his arm down. Gai Shishir twitched fiercely and gave a terrible groan. He stared up at Yi Futian, then looked down at his chest. The divine spear had been inserted right next to his heart, and terrible will was surging through his body. It seemed as if it could destroy his flesh at any moment. Everyone who was watching felt their hearts tremble fiercely. This was so cruel. Yi Futian had actually stabbed him. You're funny. Yi Futian moved the spear. His expression was still calm and undisturbed as he watched Gai Shishir. The things that had happened here today had cancelled each other out? Finally, things are getting interesting. Yi Futian looked back and saw Empress Yen smiling coldly. She seemed very satisfied. When someone from Taishan Mountain had been abused like this, it was not something that could be resolved with words. The master had broken through to the next level not long ago, and the Golden Divine Nation still dared to look down on them? Who were they kidding? If Yi Futian had been defeated, she would not have been able to say anything. If he couldn't win, then how could Renhuang-level cultivators get involved? Golden blood flowed, staining Gai Shishir's golden robes. Everyone watching from a distance was shocked by this. Even the cultivators from top forces and those who had fought Yi Futian before felt their hearts tremble. Gai Shishir had tried to kill Yi Futian today, but now the prince of the Golden Divine Nation had been mistreated by two people in a row. It was complete humiliation. It was quite awful. Of course, this was the price that he had to pay for what he had done. Empress Yen, came a cold voice. Golden light fell from the sky upon Empress Yen and Yi Futian. It was filled with terrible power. It seemed as if Empress Yan's fragile body could be pierced by this golden divine light at any moment. Are you trying to start a war between the Golden Divine Nation and Taishan Mountain? said the Renhuang coldly. Are you trying to scare me? Empress Yen looked up into the air. When you first interfered, how did you not realize this would happen? Did you think that if the Golden Divine Nation struck the first blow, Taishan Mountain would not dare respond? She rose up into the air slowly. A burst of incredibly powerful will swept out, filling the whole area. Now, we must repay you for the harm that you have done to Taishan Mountain. Empress Yan's smile was still beautiful and mischievous, but there was a coldness to it as well. A burst of radiant light bloomed from Empress Yen. At that moment, she seemed even more divine and noble. It was as if she was the empress of the whole world. Billowing will surged through her body. Everyone saw brilliant beams of light flash into life. In the next moment, a pair of wings appeared behind Empress Yen, shining with dazzling golden light that covered the earth and filled the sky. Her body transformed as well. Divine light covered her, transforming her into a goddess. The illusions of countless divine wings appeared, and endless will descended from the heavens, resonating with them. It seemed as if all of this was happening due to her power. A storm of the great path whipped through the area. It blew through Linshao City, and everyone felt as if their flesh would be torn apart. Everyone looked up at the Empress in the sky, and their hearts trembled unceasingly. Would a battle between Renhuangs break out in the sky above Linshao City today? The 3 Renhuangs from the Golden Divine Nation stood in 3 different places. One was in front, and 2 were behind him. The Renhuang in front could naturally feel how powerful their opponent's aura was. He knew that he was the only one who could fight this battle. Incomparably brilliant golden light exploded from him, hurting everyone's eyes. There was a clanging sound as golden chains shot through the air, covering the sky. They were trying to enclose the whole area. How should this debt be settled? Said Empress Yen with a smile as she stood there in the air like a goddess. As she said this, she flapped her wings, and suddenly, the storm that was whipping through the sky knocked over the people watching down below in Linshao City. What was even more frightening was that countless divine wings slashed out, cutting through the golden chains and then moving on towards the Renhuang from the Golden Divine Nation. Every single wing was like a falling sky sword. The Renhuang of the Golden Divine Nation shone with incomparably brilliant golden light, and it seemed as if a divine will had flashed to life within him, its golden pattern giving off an incomparably dazzling radiance. Endless golden chains shot through the air, locking down the entire area. Whoosh! A wild wind blew, and the frightening storm made it so that the saint-level cultivators could barely stand. In fact, they were blown away. Even Yi Futian, who was standing behind Empress Yen, could clearly feel how powerful the wind was. He was firmly planted in place, 1 foot upon Gai Shirshir. If Gai Shirshir's body was not so strong, Yi Futian's foot would have crushed him. But even so, Yi Futian was putting a lot of pressure on him because he wanted to stay in place, which was making Gai Shirshir bleed even more. His expression was full of murderous intent. This was a great humiliation. Yi Futian looked back and saw the storm heading far away, carrying away several Renhuangs. He still saw Empress Yen flapping her wings, seeming to split the sky in 2 and cutting through the golden chains. The house master of Taishan was so strong that those Renhuangs would probably not survive. After all, she was one of the 4 great disciples of Lord Taishan, even if she was the youngest of them. Yi Futian looked back at Gai Shirshir and said, "Have you thought it through?" Gai Shirshir looked at him with humiliation and anger. He had once set foot on Taishan Mountain, seeking to become a disciple of Lord Taishan, but he had been refused, which had made him unhappy. As a prince of the Golden Divine Nation and the foremost young talent, joining Taishan Mountain as a cultivator would be a confirmation of their strength. And yet he had been refused at the gate. Thus he had targeted Yi Futian. However, how could he have known that a day would come when Yi Futian would be stepping on him? Yi Futian still looked indifferent when he saw Gai Shirshir's expression. Gai Shirshir was naturally talented and was a prince of the Golden Divine Nation. He was even said to be a candidate for the future ruler, so he was incredibly arrogant. When he acted, he gave no thought for the consequences. With such a high status, he was not afraid of anything. So, he had tried to kill Yi Futian. Even up until now, he did not realize what he had done. It seems like you have not given it enough thought yet. Yi Futian lifted the spear and thrust it down. This time, he thrust it right into Gai Shirshir's heart. Gai Shirshir was incredibly powerful. Even though the spear pierced his heart, it would still not be easy for it to kill him. After all, he had a body of the great path. But in the instant that the spear came down, his heart stopped beating. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Yi Futian. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.